Let me ask you something. What if I told you that there is a single number, one specific dollar amount sitting in a savings or investment account that will change the way you sleep at night, the way you walk into a room, the way you make decisions, the way you treat people, and the way people treat you? Not $1 million, not 100,000, $25,000. That's it. I know what you're thinking. That's not that much money. And you're right. It isn't. But that's exactly the point, because most people never get there. And the ones who do, something shifts inside them, something that can't be undone. I've been watching people and money for over 50 years now, and I want to tell you what I've seen. Pull up a chair. Let me tell you about a young woman named Maria. She was 29 years old, working 2 jobs. A receptionist during the day, waitress 3 nights a week. Smart woman, hardworking, the kind of person who did everything right on paper. But every single month, Maria lived about $400 away from disaster. That was the gap between what came in and what went out. $400. That's it. That's all that stood between her and a phone call she didn't want to make to her mother. One Tuesday afternoon, her car broke down. $380 to fix it. She told me later, I didn't cry because of the car. I cried because I realized I'm one flat tire away from losing everything I built. Now, maybe that's you right now. Maybe it's someone you love. And if it is, I need you to hear this. That feeling. That low hum of financial anxiety that sits in your chest like a stone. That is not a character flaw. That is not evidence that you're bad with money or lazy or irresponsible. That is just the reality of living without a financial foundation underneath you. Think about a house with no foundation. Could be beautiful on the outside. Fresh paint. Nice curtains. But the moment the ground shifts, and the ground always shifts, cracks start to appear. Medical bill. Job lost. Car trouble. A family member who needs help. Inflation quietly eating your paycheck. The storms don't ask for your permission. They just arrive. And here's what nobody tells you when you're young and starting out. The stress of having no financial cushion doesn't just affect your bank account. It affects your brain. Studies. Real ones. Show that financial stress occupies mental bandwidth, the same way carrying a heavy physical weight does. You think slower. You make worse decisions. You snap at the people you love. Poverty. And I mean any kind of financial scarcity, even mild. It actually reduces your cognitive capacity. Not because you're less intelligent, but because your mind is constantly running background calculations just to survive. Can I afford lunch today? Should I pay the electric bill or the credit card? What if I get sick this month? That background noise is exhausting. And most people don't even realize they're carrying it. Let that sink in. Now here's where things get interesting. For decades, I've watched the moment, the exact moment, when that background noise starts to quiet down. And it almost always happens somewhere around that first meaningful savings milestone. For most people living in America today, that number is somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 sitting somewhere safe and accessible. I've settled on $25,000 as the landmark. Not because it's magic, but because it represents about 6 months of real life expenses for the average American family. And 6 months, that changes everything. Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine you've been walking your whole life on a tightrope. Every step requires complete concentration. You can't look around. You can't wave to someone on the side. You certainly can't stop to enjoy the view. One wrong move and you fall. Now imagine someone builds a net underneath you. You're still on the tightrope, same height, same distance to travel. But now, you can breathe. You can look up. You can take a slightly bigger step. Because even if you slip, the fall won't destroy you. That net. That is what $25,000 does. It is not wealth. It is not retirement. It is simply the removal of catastrophic risk from your everyday life. And when catastrophic risk is removed from your everyday life, something remarkable happens to your decision making. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas. Thomas was a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company. Decent job. Decent salary. But for 12 years, he stayed in that job even though his boss was difficult. The work had stopped challenging him. And deep down, he knew he had more to offer. Why did he stay? Fear. Pure financial fear. He had 2 kids, a mortgage, and about $1,100 in savings. That's it. $1,100 between his family and a real crisis. So when his boss treated him poorly, Thomas smiled and nodded. When a better opportunity came along that required a 2-week gap in employment, Thomas said no thank you. When a friend asked him to invest $5,000 into a small business, one that ended up doing very well, by the way, Thomas said he couldn't risk it. Then one year, Thomas and his wife made a decision. They lived lean for 18 months, packed lunches, canceled subscriptions, drove the old car another year, and they saved. Slowly, steadily, quietly, until they had $28,000 set aside. Thomas told me, the day we crossed 25,000, I walked into work differently. I can't explain it exactly, but my boss said something rude, and instead of shrinking, I just looked at him calmly and said, let's talk about that later. And I walked away. He wasn't reckless. He didn't quit, but the dynamic had shifted. Because here's the truth about money that nobody puts in the personal finance books. Money is stored freedom. When you have none, other people own your time, your boss, your landlord, the credit card company. They own you quietly and completely because you need what they provide and you have nothing to fall back on. When you have some, even just enough to survive 6 months without income, you become negotiable. You become a person with options. And people with options are treated differently because they act differently. Think about that for a moment. Now, here's the piece I want you to really hold on to. The psychological transformation that comes with crossing that first threshold. It doesn't stop there. It creates a new identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who spends. You start thinking of yourself as someone who builds. And that identity shift is worth more in the long run than the $25,000 itself. Once you have your foundation, your net, your armor, your 6 months of breathing room. The next question is, what do you do with any money beyond that? And this is where I've watched people make the greatest leaps and the greatest mistakes. Let me explain something about money that took me years to understand intuitively, even though I could explain it mathematically from the beginning. Money, when invested wisely, behaves like a living organism. It grows, it reproduces, it compounds. Here's a simple example. If you invest $1,000 and it grows 10% per year, after 1 year you have $1,100. But in year 2, you're not earning 10% of 1,000. You're earning 10% of 1,100. And the year after that, 10% of 1,210. The growth earns growth. The interest earns interest. People nod when they hear this. They understand the math, but they don't feel it until they watch it happen. It's like a snowball rolling down a long hill. At the top, it's small and slow. You could stop it with one hand, but give it time, give it slope, give it snow to gather, and eventually, nothing stops it. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what to invest in, because your situation is specific to you, and anyone who gives you one-size-fits-all investment advice with complete confidence is either selling something or hasn't seen enough winters. What I will tell you is this. The 3 things that matter most are time, consistency, and patience. Time in the market, consistent contributions, and the patience to do nothing when everything inside you wants to do something. That last one is harder than it sounds. I had a neighbor years ago, sharp man, retired engineer named Harold. Every time the market dropped 5 or 10%, Harold would call me, voice tight with anxiety, asking whether he should sell. And every single time I told him the same thing. Harold, you wouldn't sell your house because your neighbor had a bad week. Your investments are not lottery tickets. They are partial ownership in real businesses run by real people making real products. Short-term prices move on emotion. Long-term prices move on reality. Stay the course. Now, let's talk about the things that knock people off course. Because in 50 years, I have seen the same mistakes made over and over again. Not because people are foolish, but because the world is specifically designed to pull money out of your hands. Mistake number 1, lifestyle inflation. This one is insidious because it feels like progress. You get a raise. So you get a nicer apartment, nicer car, nicer clothes, better restaurants. And suddenly, despite earning more, you're saving the same amount as before, or less, because your expenses grew to swallow your income. I call this the golden treadmill. You're running faster, but you're not going anywhere. The people I've watched build real wealth, when they got a raise, they lived on their old salary for another year and invested the difference. Every single time. Mistake number 2, trying to get rich quickly. I understand this one in my bones. Because when you're struggling, when you're watching other people seem to leap ahead, the temptation to find a shortcut is overwhelming. Crypto, options trading, a friend's guaranteed business opportunity. Let me tell you about a young man named Deshaun. Deshaun was 24 working hard, had saved up $9,000 over 2 years. $9,000 that represented enormous sacrifice and discipline and delayed gratification. In 6 weeks of day trading, following tips from a social media account with 500,000 followers, he lost 7,000 of it. He told me he felt physically ill, not just because of the money, but because of the time that money represented. 2 years of packed lunches and skipped vacations and saying, I can't this weekend. Gone in 6 weeks. The people selling fast wealth have already made their money. They made it from you. Mistake number 3, not starting because the amount feels too small. This one breaks my heart a little, if I'm honest. I've met countless people who say, I'll start investing when I have more to work with. And I understand the logic. $50 a month feels pointless. But here's what they don't see. It was never about the $50. It was about building the habit of an investor, the identity, the muscle. A man who invests $50 a month consistently will, over time, find ways to invest 100, then 200, then more. Because he's built the behavior into his life. The man who waits until he has enough to start usually never starts at all. Plant the seed even in poor soil. Water it. The soil improves. All right. Let me give you something practical to walk away with. A simple ladder. Not complicated. Not fancy. Just a sequence that, if you follow it, will get you from where you are to where you want to be. Rung 1. Stop the bleeding. Before you invest a single dollar, you have to stop the money from leaking out. Go through your expenses with honest eyes, not to punish yourself, just to see clearly. There are almost certainly things you're paying for that bring you very little joy or value. Cancel them. Redirect that money. Rung 2. Build your foundation. That $25,000 safety net. This is your first mission. It will take time. That's okay. Put it in a high-yield savings account where it earns something but stays accessible. Every month, no matter what, put something toward this number. Treat it like a bill you owe yourself. Rung 3. Eliminate high-interest debt. Any debt costing you more than 8 or 9% interest is an emergency. Credit cards especially. You cannot outinvest a 20% interest rate. Pay those off with urgency. Rung 4. Start investing consistently. Once the foundation is laid and the toxic debt is gone, begin contributing regularly to retirement accounts if you have them. Take every employer match available to you, because that is free money, and walking away from it is walking away from your own salary. Beyond that, a simple low-cost index fund that tracks the broad market has historically outperformed the vast majority of professional money managers over long-time horizons. Rung 5. Let time do the heavy lifting. This is the rung most people underestimate, because it doesn't require action. It requires stillness, patience, trust. The engine is running. Your job is to stay out of the way. A few warnings before I move on, because I love you enough to be direct. Beware of anyone who urgency pressures you. Real wealth building is slow and boring. Anyone telling you the opportunity closes tomorrow is selling you something. The stock market opens again Monday. Good companies will still be there. Beware of comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Social media is a highlight reel. The person showing you their luxury vacation may be financing it on credit. You do not know what is behind the curtain. Stay in your own lane with your eyes on your own numbers. Beware of emotional investing. The market will drop. Significantly. Sometimes terrifyingly. The investors who build wealth are the ones who see a drop and think sale rather than disaster. This requires preparation, mentally and financially, which is why your foundation matters. When the storm comes and you have 6 months of expenses safely set aside, you can watch the market fall without flinching. You're not forced to sell, and that composure is worth a fortune. I want to take a moment here and talk about something that doesn't come up in most finance discussions, because I think it's the most important part. Why are we doing this? I've known people with a great deal of money who were miserable, genuinely, deeply miserable. I've known people of modest means who radiated a kind of contentment that made rich men envious. Money alone does not produce a good life, but financial peace. That foundation we talked about. It removes a very specific category of suffering, and that matters. Here's how I think about wealth. It is not the goal. It is the condition that makes other goals possible. When you're financially secure, you can take the job that fulfills you rather than just the one that pays. You can be present with your children instead of mentally calculating expenses during dinner. You can help someone who needs it without wondering whether you can afford to be generous. You can take risks. Risks. The kind that lead to growth. I think about money like oxygen. You don't spend your life obsessing over oxygen. But you know what happens when you don't have enough. You can't think about anything else. And when you have plenty, you forget about it. You just live. That's the goal. Not to think about money constantly, but to think about it so wisely and so carefully now in these years, so that later, you simply don't have to. The peace on the other side of that discipline is profound.
I've sat with people in their 70s and 80s who spent 30 years making intentional decisions with their money, not obsessing over it, not worshiping it, just treating it with respect and patience and discipline. And to a person, every single one of them told me some version of the same thing. I wish I had started earlier. Not, I wish I had more. Just earlier. I want to leave you with something. I don't know where you are right now. Maybe you're doing all right. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you're Maria, wondering how long before the next thing breaks. Maybe you're Thomas, smiling and nodding when you shouldn't have to. Maybe you're Deshaun, trying to recover from a painful mistake that taught you a lesson you'll carry the rest of your life. Wherever you are, you are not behind. You are exactly where you are. And from exactly where you are, you can begin. The acorn doesn't apologize for not already being an oak tree. It just does what acorns do. You start. You protect what you build. You let time work. You stay the course when it gets hard. And one day, I can't tell you when, but I promise you it comes. You will have a moment. Maybe sitting at your kitchen table. Maybe driving somewhere on a Tuesday. And you'll realize the background noise is gone. The stone in your chest is lighter. You sleep differently. You wake up differently. You walk into rooms differently. Not because you're rich, but because you're free. And that first step toward that freedom, that first rung on the ladder, starts with a decision you can make today. Not when you earn more, not when things calm down, not after the holidays. Today, here's my challenge for you, and I mean it sincerely. In the comments below, write one number, just one. It could be $50, it could be $500, it could be $5,000. Whatever amount you are committing to set aside this month as the first stone in your foundation, write it down, publicly, because something changes when you say a thing out loud. You become accountable to it. You become accountable to yourself. I'll be reading. Take care of yourself. Be patient with yourself. And stop.